What's up, Taiwan? I'm Yvonne with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. A new law in Taiwan could make previously secret documents available to the public. The newly amended Political Archives Act took effect on Wednesday, the 77th anniversary of the 228 incident. It sets an extendable 40-year deadline for the declassification of national security documents. The change is being hailed as a milestone in Taiwan's efforts towards transitional justice. It will allow the families of people victimized during the country's authoritarian period to confirm the fate of their loved ones. The period of political oppression that started with the 228 incident in 1947 remains central to many Taiwanese people's identities. But many of those whose families arrived as refugees during the Chinese Civil War feel their suffering has been forgotten. Bryn Thomas has more.
Every year, on February 28th, Taiwan remembers its past. The date marks the start of an uprising against Chinese nationalist rule in 1947. On that day, police brutality sparked mob violence against recent arrivals from mainland China. Years later, memories of the violence and the political repression that followed have become key to Taiwan's national identity. Today, the incident is commonly framed from the perspective of the local Taiwanese and not the Chinese who suffered.
当时被杀害的外省人，绝大部分都是旅客、游客跟商人。那么，所以目前看到的资料都不详细，而且都不准确。那么，从1000多个到2000多个、3000多个都有死伤。因为28发生以后，后来这个民国38年。 这个大陆撤退，两岸就不来往，而且后来的228赔偿条例里面，只包括所谓被政府杀害的这些所谓受难者，不包括被暴徒杀害的受难者。
These victims were among the hundreds of thousands of Chinese people that moved to Taiwan as refugees or as part of the Republic of China's government during the Chinese Civil War. Their influx and its effects on the economy and existing power structures in Taiwan led to tensions, then mob violence, and then years of political repression. Liao Qiping is the grandson of an activist who was killed in the violence. He comes from a local family that was compensated as part of reparations in the 1990s. Now, he's on a mission to make sure the government recognizes all the victims.
你要还真正整个228真相的原貌，这包含当时有外省人受害，所以如果我们这个政府民间大家一起努力，现在这个生活在我们台湾生活在中华民国的所有的国民，不管他是外省人、台湾人，那才会真正的大家能够放下心结，共同寻求台湾更美好的未来。
Today, estimates on the number killed vary between 18,000 and 28,000, but many feel these murky figures only tell part of the story. The exact number of Chinese who died or were victimized is unknown, and the topic is highly politicized.
我觉得主要是因为说，228这个议题，因为它太敏感了，所以它政治力量，各种各样的政治力量，其实很早就介入了，过早的介入。那又因为说到了很后来，我们的这个官方资料才慢慢解密嘛。
In the years since the 228 incident, Taiwan has grown into a modern democracy, one that prides itself on facing up to its authoritarian past. But how that history is remembered, and by who, continues to define its political divide. Scott Huang, Sam Hui, and Bryn Thomas for TaiwanPlus.
And to learn more about how 228 is remembered differently among Taiwan's different ethnic groups, Ed Moon spoke to James Lynn, a historian at the University of Washington.
The 228 incident is obviously a massive event in Taiwanese history and in the formation of a Taiwanese identity. Among the victims that day were Chinese who had come over, mainlanders, as they're often referred to. Could you tell us a little bit about the violence and the impact that had on the mainlander community?
The violence was generally directed against people who were thought to be associated with the Kuomintang government that had arrived in 1945, essentially folks that arrived after the Japanese had left, had really taken advantage of Taiwan's economic situation to rule in a kind of corrupt, inept manner. And that, combined with post-war inflation, led to a lot of resentment from the native Taiwanese population. And so in that immediate kind of post-February 28th violence against the government, there was a lot of chaos. And according to recent historical scholarship, it seems about 1,000 of these mainlanders, Waishenan, were killed in the weeks after February 28th.
Do you think the fact that historical memory has really focused on the government crackdown and forgotten about the events maybe in the weeks preceding it, do you think that has kind of helped to fuel a kind of almost divide among the different ethnicities in Taiwan in terms of how they remember 228?
Historical memory is definitely one of the most important parts of 228 today, because the February 20th incident, is over 70 years ago, and the implications for it have to do with Taiwan's democratization, the issue of transitional justice, and kind of righting the wrongs that occurred under the 70 years of Kuomintang rule. So in some ways, it symbolizes kind of the entire rule of the Kuomintang on Taiwan. In some ways, it has grown to become maybe even more, as you were saying, maybe even more than what the initial February 20th incident was about, which is actually kind of complicated, and it involved a lot of kind of movements and counter movements.
So do you think that kind of these different historical interpretations based on ethnicity and identity may gradually all come together to form a consensus, or is it something that is possible to be passed down from generation to generation?
These expressions of identity, especially ones who hold it to a stronger degree, tend to be in older generations today, people who grew up under the historical authoritarian period and whose childhood exposure would have been more focused on a lot of the ethnic grievances. I think that these identities are being slowly replaced by what we're seeing in contemporary Taiwan, which is more of a civic, pluralistic kind of national identity as opposed to an ethnic national identity.
That was our reporter Ed Moon speaking with historian James Lynn. A Taiwanese man dressed as a monk has been arrested in Japan for drug smuggling. Customs officials at Tokyo's Narita airport caught the man with 40 pouches of ketamine weighing 6 kilograms total. He was traveling from Cambodia with almost $2.5 million worth of drugs strapped to his body under a monk's robe. Health authorities have recorded a rare measles cluster infection at a hospital in northern Taiwan. A medical worker contracted the disease from Taiwan's first domestic measles patient this year. Around 600 people have been identified as close contacts of the two patients. Taiwan has recorded 3 measles cases total this year, the third being a foreign national coming from Malaysia. The South Korean government is sending military and community doctors to hospitals where essential medical services have been disrupted. This emergency program starts in March. It's in response to a mass walkout by trainee doctors that has put the country in a medical crisis. The government issued a back-to-work order with a Thursday deadline. It's warned of prosecution and medical license suspensions for doctors who refuse to comply.
의료 현장을 이탈한 전공의 여러분, 국민들께서 더 이상 걱정하지 않으시도록 현명한 결정을 내려주시기 바랍니다.
U.S. authorities are working to contain deadly wildfires raging across the Texas Panhandle, including the second largest blaze the state has ever seen. Rosie Greninger reports.
Plumes of smoke fill the skies over the Texas Panhandle as multiple wildfires ravage this region of the United States. And on the ground, flames lap the sides of the road as first responders race through hellish conditions to help. 5 separate fires in the state's northernmost counties are leaving a trail of destruction, already ripping through over 400,000 hectares of land. It's prompted thousands of people to evacuate. One man forced to leave his home and belongings behind, returning just hours later to ashes.
It came up very fast. I saw the neighbor's house starting to burn, and I called 911, and the fire trucks got here, but it just started really fast. The flames were going everywhere. By the time we got back, well, there was nothing left.
60 counties are under disaster declarations, with thousands of homes and businesses cut off from power. The most intense blaze, named the Smokehouse Creek Fire, has become the second largest the state has ever seen. Firefighters say strong winds, dry grass, and unseasonably warm temperatures are fueling the massive fires.
Wind was coming straight out of the north and made just this massive wall of fire moving across the landscape. We have more resources coming in from across the state and across the nation to come assist us. So when the winds do pick back up this weekend, we will have people and resources and all kinds of things here and ready to go.
Despite hundreds of firefighters deployed to the region, the Smokehouse Creek blaze is only 3% contained, while the 4 other fires are burning out of control. Weather conditions are expected to ease slightly, but as the fire stretches into the neighbouring state of Oklahoma, authorities warn the days ahead will bring more imminent fire danger. Luffy Lee and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
Firefighters are battling out-of-control blazes in the Australian state of Victoria despite a break in intense heat. Cooler temperatures and light rain did little to stop the bushfires in southeast Australia. More than 30,000 people in Victoria have been told to evacuate their homes after half the state was warned of extreme fire danger on Tuesday. High temperatures and dry winds have created the most dangerous fire conditions in the state in 4 years. Taiwan is planning to set a new milestone in its space program by sending its first probe to the moon later this year. Eric Gao has the details.
This little device could soon be on the surface of the moon. It's the Deep Space Radiation Probe, built by Taiwan's National Central University and a Japanese company. If all goes to plan, it'll be on a Japanese rocket heading for the moon before the end of the year.
所以这算是台湾第一次到低轨道以外的地方。未来这10年、20年的话，那就是到时候生态空还有月球周遭相关环境对这些相关产品的需求其实也会增加，所以我们也希望透过这个方式去建构我们的设计跟制作能力。
The probe took almost 2 years to design, and as its name implies, it's meant to study lunar radiation and its impact on equipment and astronauts. Researchers will take the findings from this mission to improve future versions.
目前它所吸收的辐射剂量，然后透过多次的辐射剂量采样，我们可以计算我们在进行设计跟评估所需要知道的剂量率，就是说我们在这个区域底下的状况底下，每单位时间会吸收多少辐射剂量，这对未来的设计或载人任务的评估的话来讲是蛮重要的资料。
The space race is heating up again, with several countries vying to launch their own lunar or space industries. If Taiwan can make it to the moon later this year, it'll be a giant leap for its own efforts. Andy Xue and Eric Gao for TaiwanPlus.
Officials in eastern Taiwan are warning residents that tree pruning could threaten a protected species of fruit bat. The government was responding to requests for trees to be pruned along Hualien County's Mainlander River. The estuary is part of a coastal conservation area and is an important habitat for the protected Ryukyu flying fox. There are currently just 260 of these animals living in Taiwan, and 50 of them are in Hualien.
县府这2年其实也特别针对树木修剪这件事情去做教育训练，不要过度修剪。那一个是保护树木健康，一个同时也维护台湾胡服它的栖地的完整。
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, check out this Bond in Motion exhibition at the International Spy Museum in Washington, showcasing more than 15 vehicles from James Bond films. I'm Yvonne Yang. Take care, and I'll see you next time.